In 2019, a virus was found in Wuhan, China. By March 2020, this virus was known throughout the world as COVID-19 and was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization.
Trust us, the worst is yet ahead of us. Let's prevent this tragedy.
At the end of 2020, COVID-19's number of global deaths rose to at least 3 million. Now it has claimed many more lives, but it is important to note that a vital part of the step towards elimination of COVID-19 was the vaccine. At least 70% of the world population has taken one dose of it. The COVID vaccine was able to help billions of people gain immunity and live throughout the pandemic. This concept of vaccines has also been used in many different times of history. They were able to help the human race throughout crippling diseases and lessen the blows of them. Nowadays, vaccines are an ordinary part of our lives. But how did we discover this type of treatment, and why is it so important?
The concept of vaccines was a turning point in the field of medicine, as it was the first successful treatment using a similar but less harmful virus to become immune to a more threatening one. The first vaccine was able to eradicate smallpox and become the basis for other viral vaccines. The creation of the smallpox vaccine by Edward Jenner was fundamental because future vaccines followed the same principal technique he used. Not only did this open up a whole new field of medicine called vaccine epidemiology, but it also made a huge contribution to global health. Vaccines have successfully eliminated devastating diseases from the public such as smallpox and rinderpest. Without protection against these, the world would have had greater setbacks and a much harder time getting to the point of complexity and understanding we have reached not only in medicine, but also in many advancements in the history of humanity.
To understand why vaccines are so important, we have to go back to the period where vaccines did not exist. One major disease that was crippling the world throughout many centuries was smallpox. It was believed to originate over 10,000 years ago and was spread through rodents and squirrels that eventually infected the human race. As smallpox expanded, many prominent ancient places took note of it. It can be traced back to ancient Egypt, where mummies were examined and found to have died from smallpox, and in Asia, specifically India and China before the birth of Christ, where archaeologists discovered records of the infected. Furthermore, in the 16th century, smallpox was already well known to all of Europe. Trades such as the Columbian Exchange furthered the spread from Europe to the Americas. Soon, smallpox had taken over the world.
Many methods around the world were being tested by physicians to see if they could cure smallpox. Most of the treatments were under the umbrella of inoculation, which is the process of deliberately infecting the healthy to develop immunity. One type was called insufflation. During the Middle Ages, the Chinese used this process, where smallpox scabs were ground up, dried, inserted into a pipe, and blown into the patient's nostrils or inhaled. Another process performed was variolation, which was named after the scientific name for smallpox, variola. In the 18th century, Europe was introduced to this type of treatment, which involved taking the liquid from a smallpox pustule and transferring it into a pre-made cut on a healthy patient. However, it was risky and had side effects, including transferring diseases that the infected had to the healthy patient, spreading smallpox to other people, and developing smallpox but not immunity.
In 1749, Edward Jenner was born in England. At the early age of 8, he was inoculated with smallpox and survived with perceived immunity. At the age of 13, he was a student to a surgeon in Bristol, and it was here where the record shows that he heard a milkmaid say, "I shall never have smallpox, for I have had cowpox. I shall never have an ugly pox-marked face." This remark stuck with him throughout his career, and in 1796, Jenner found a milkmaid named Sarah Nelms, who had fresh cowpox pustules on her arms, and he inoculated an 8-year-old boy named James Phipps. After the inoculation, James became mildly sick but soon recovered. Later, when Jenner inoculated James with a smallpox pustule for testing, James had developed no signs of smallpox, and so Jenner concluded that his theory of vaccination had worked. Jenner later had tried to report his findings to the government, but was dismissed as not believable. In the next few years, he did more experiments on different ages of people and published his own booklet called An Inquiry into the Causes and Effects of the Variola Vaccinate. Because the Latin word for cow is vacca, Jenner decided to coin his new procedure, vaccination.
Although physicians eagerly accepted the vaccine because it was very beneficial towards health, the people didn't completely trust the vaccine. they still felt uneasy towards this new treatment, and people with such concerns convened into the first anti-vaccination league, where anti-vaxxers presented conspiracies about vaccination and their opinions on it. One issue was the fear of delivering cowpox into a human, thinking that one may become half cow, half human, or that a person could give birth to a baby cow. Additionally, after laws made for vaccines to be required, the people wanted control of their body and their rights. In England, after the Compulsory Vaccination Act of 1853, people were required to get vaccinated. However, after the British Vaccination Act of 1898, there were exemptions allowed, and by the end of that year, more than 200,000 exemptions were issued. On the other side of the world, the US was also experiencing protests against vaccinations. After schools required students to get vaccinated before attending, parents protested that they would rather go to prison or pay fees than get their children vaccinated.
While most of the impacts for the smallpox vaccine are long-term, there are still some short-term impacts the creation of the vaccine had sparked. In 1721, Boston suffered a smallpox epidemic. The number of deaths due to smallpox stayed in the thousands until 1800, where the vaccine was administered to the Americas and the number of deaths in Boston dropped extremely low to only several hundred. Another short-term impact of the vaccine were the creation of public health mandates in the 1840s in areas like England and part of the United States for the public to get the smallpox vaccine as a step towards eradication. This was one of the first examples of mandates to protect the health of the public, and they led to the creation of more important ones, such as the mandate created for COVID-19. One immediate impact of the vaccine was also anger at the government and the start of protests for rights. Many rejected the vaccine out of fear, and so there were many pamphlets written to the government to oppose vaccines. This led to the protests in the public, which can be related back to the present, as there are still many protests concerning the rights of the people today.
In 1975, Rahima was the last person to contract smallpox, and in 1980, the World Health Organization declared smallpox eradicated. The vaccine was able to have a long-term impact on how several other vaccines were made. They helped find a cure for diseases such as polio and tetanus. This also created vaccine epidemiology, a new field of medicine, which has further increased our knowledge on vaccines and how to create better ones. Lastly, it helped in our most recent pandemic, COVID-19, in which a vaccine was created within 2 years of its spread.
The creation of the first vaccine was fundamental to the way that the world has evolved to today. It not only eradicated smallpox from the world, which is seen as a major success, it was the basis for all vaccines following it. The concept of vaccines has allowed not only the medical world, but the evolution of humanity to run smoothly without too much disruption from high-risk diseases. Thank you for listening to our documentary.